Well, that wasn't real kosher for the rabbis, so though they preserved the book of Enoch, some of the scribes added a little here and there, and so corrupted the book of Enoch. I cannot tell you that the book of Enoch is divinely inspired. I can tell you that the angels talked to him, and he rode in this aircraft, this circular vehicle, which we'd call a flying saucer today. But back in those days, Enoch called it a house. But his description of it is absolutely science nonfiction. Science nonfiction as opposed to science fiction. But I want you to notice some of the things that he had to say. For example, he said that in his day, the day had 9 parts and the night had 9 parts. That's a total of 18 parts. Well, now, we know that today there are 24 hours in a day. But for some reason, back in Enoch's day, before the flood, they didn't look at it in hours. They called it, I don't know what they called it, but it's translated parts. 9 parts in the day, 9 parts in the night. And today there are 12 hours in a day and 12 hours at night. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. I don't know when the 12 hours or 24 hours came along. I've not been able to find that in history. But in the Bible, obviously, we don't have 24-hour days in the Scripture. So even in Bible days, we really don't know what their sundials told or what the increments were. I know this, even up until the last century, the old farmer would go out, in the field. Gary Stearman was telling me this. He said the farmer would get up before daybreak and he'd be out plowing because it was cool and not hot. And about mid-morning, he'd look up and see where the sun was and say, it's about mid-morning. In other words, he didn't bother with the hours. When he saw the sun straight up, it was time for lunch. When he saw the sun setting, it was supper time. And he went to bed when the sun set, and he got up before the sun rose. So even in, shall we say, the 19th century, farmers really weren't that concerned with how many hours there were in the day. Now, we know that there were clocks, and when the clock was invented, they came up with 12 hours in a day. But in the days of Enoch, before the flood, evidently, they didn't have hours as we know them today. There's another thing about this I thought was interesting. Enoch referred to the sun and the moon as wagons or chariots. A wagon, he called one a wagon in verse 5, and by the time he got to verse 37, it was a chariot. A wagon or a chariot is basically the same thing. But the reason he called them this is because they look like discs. Now here was Enoch riding around in this disc, and he looks up and he sees this flat light coming out, and it's round. Maybe he thought it was like the craft he was in. He was not told that it was a sphere, that it was like a ball or a globe. He just simply looked up and saw the sun and decided that it was a wagon or a chariot, like the celestial vehicle in which he was riding. Said the same thing of the moons. I thought that was kind of interesting. And so it's possible, that back in those days, the angels flew around in circular craft. And then he talked about the sun and the moon ascending in portals. And back when we first looked at chapter 36, in which he discussed these portals, I thought they were points of the compass. But the more I studied, when I got into the book of the luminaries, it occurred to me that these are the constellations, because the sun rises every morning in a constellation. And each month, during the 12 months, the sun rises in a different constellation. So it moves through the constellations into another constellations, and these constellations are about, roughly speaking, 30 degrees across the 360-degree circle of the sky. So we ended up with 360-degree circles. We ended up with these ancient depictions of the star chart called constellations as about 30 degrees. Now, you got to understand that Cancer is shorter than 30 degrees and Virgo is longer. It's almost 50 degrees or 60 degrees. I'm not sure exactly. What I'm saying is the sun will move through one constellation quicker and then it will move through. In fact, it moves through Cancer in 20 days. And it moves through the average constellation in 30 days. It moves through Virgo, takes a lot longer, like 45 days or so. So the constellations of the heavens were discussed here in the ancient book of Enoch as portals. But I want you to know that Enoch did not mention these. And if he did, then some Jewish scholar in later years took out the names of these constellations, eliminated them. You see, the text of Enoch is a little bit corrupted. And so why would the Jews corrupt the constellations? Mentioning the fact that they are portals through which the sun and the moon travel, but did not mention Virgo or Libra or Scorpio or Sagittarius or Capricorn or Pisces or any of these others. Why not? Because the fallen angels in Genesis 6 created an idolatry and told those people that those constellations represented something diabolically opposed to what God's original message was. See, God's original message was that Virgo brings forth the Son of God. And he fights the dragon and the serpent. And when he finally comes back at the end of the 12 constellations, which, by the way, the Virgo represents Bethlehem, the first advent of Christ. Leo represents the second coming of Christ, the second advent of Christ. And we have the church age in between. It's a marvelous story. In our magazine, by the way, we have been offering The Witness of the Stars and the Gospel of the Stars. These various books tell what these ancient constellations mean. Don't have time to get into it today. But the rabbis took all that out simply because when the fallen angels perverted God's original Bible, they came up with another religion, a religion worshiping them. So the sun and the moon and the constellations became gods. In the second commandment, first and second commandment, God says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I'm the only God you should be worshiping. Don't worship anything in the heavens above." So when God said that, the rabbis took it that, well, we should eliminate the names of these constellations here in the book of Enoch, if they ever were there, and just not tell the story. So they took all that out, and all we have in the book of the luminaries is the story of the sun and the moon traveling through portals. All right? We don't have any other explanations for this. And I think it's because the rabbis took it out because God had said, don't worship anything in the heavens because it's been perverted. So we've lost that possibility of some ancient explanation of the star charts. Well, this is a fascinating study, and perhaps tomorrow we'll talk a little more about it. In fact, I want to urge you to get our September issue of Prophecy in the News, 2009 issue, September 2009, and read the whole story here about the Book of the Luminaries. We covered most of it, but it was so long I had to finish the Book of the Luminaries in our October issue, which, by the way, is going to the printers this week and be printed out by next week. You could get it just in a week or 10 days, but the end of September, if you will subscribe or if you will order it. And so we invite you to call the phone number or order it right here on the website. Get the next year's issues of Prophecy in the News magazine, $34.95. And if you will, I'll send you $48 worth of books, absolutely free. It's our way of saying thank you for subscribing to Prophecy in the News. The Mystery of the Menorah and the Hebrew Alphabet, Hidden Prophecies in the Song of Moses, Guardians of the Grail, that's the legend of the Holy Grail, and the men who plan to rule the world. That's Rise of the Antichrist. And They Pierced the Veil and Saw the Future. That's a study of the 12 minor prophets. These 4 books can be yours absolutely free if you will subscribe to our magazine, Prophecy in the News. And your subscription money will help us to finish this building, to pay for airtime, to catch up on our budget. We're $50,000 under our budget by the end of the summer. And so over September, October, we need to catch up. I pray that you'll help us. God bless you. Thanks for watching. I'm J.R. Church. We'll see you again tomorrow with our analysis of the news.